Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first this week for our 2 games is 1998's Metal Gear Solid, Hideo Kojima's masterpiece that established the 3D stealth action genre while proving the cinematic potential of games with in-engine cutscenes.
Following that is the wacky adventure of a Japanese man trying to make his own video game in the hopes that it will woo the girl of his dreams, 2017's Dandy Dungeon, Legend of Brave Yamada.
Boy, Joe, you sure know how to pick 'em.
I have been waiting to talk about my game for like 2 years now.
Yeah, that does sound about right. I've been seeing this title float around our outlines and future episode plans. I'm like, I don't know what this is, but wow, I sure didn't expect it to be paired with Metal Gear Solid.
Me neither.
So that's a YouTube thumbnail that is quite the mashup of games there. What could possibly be the theme between these 2 games? What did you write down here? One man against the world as love truly does bloom on the battlefield. I'll take it.
And the love interest in both games, their name starts with an M. You've got Meryl and you've got Maria.
Interesting. I'm trying to remember what Sniper Wolf's first name started with.
Is it Natasha? I think it is.
Maybe, but there's also Natasha Romanenko, who's like the weapons. So like that's, I don't know. It's probably not M. It's not going to be the most fitting theme, but you know what? I think that is applicable for these 2 games. Joe, how are you doing? It's been a while since we've talked. We had that solo episode, so we're back. How you doing? What are you playing?
I've been playing a lot recently, actually. It's basically just been me continuing along in 13 Sentinels, which is very good. The RTS gameplay leaves some to be desired. It's kind of boring, honestly, but it's like the smallest fraction of the game, as far as I can tell. It's mostly just, the story. I have learned firsthand now why it is the easiest game to accidentally spoil in the world, and that is that you can go in the story in literally any order. The game I am playing is not the same game Matt played, for example, because I'm learning things in different spots and at different times than he did, depending on what characters I'm doing the stories of. So that's interesting, and also makes it the most frustrating game to talk to anybody about on Earth.
I can imagine. Non-linear storytelling is like that.
And this game is non-linear. Well, no, this game is linear. It's weird. It's weird.
In different directions and different angles. I've been playing more Horizon Forbidden West. I think I'm about 19 hours in. We set up our base of operations, and then the game presents you with here are the 3 main missions to do before we can probably start progressing to endgame things. And so I've almost completed the first of those 3, and I'm at level 28. I'm playing on story difficulty, so I'm way over leveled. I'm probably 10 levels over where I should be, which is a lot in Horizon parlance. So having a good time with it, really liking it. The biggest flaw of the game, as I had heard from reviewers, and I totally agree with, for a game that relies so much on loot, there is an animation when you're picking up things that Aloy has to stop and bend down and pick up every time. It's not long, but when you're running by and you're trying to grab wood or medicinal plants or whatever, the fact that you have to stop your run to quickly bend down and pick up, no, don't go for that much realism there. But
I thought we'd learned. I thought we'd The Last of Us doesn't even have that problem.
Yeah.
You just walk past a cabinet and take everything in there in like 2 seconds.
Yeah, you don't have to have the arms like passing over it to complete the animation. It's silly, but I definitely enjoy everything else about it.
Interesting. Eventually I will get to Forbidden Dawn one day.
Yeah, both of those games there. All right, let's talk about some composer follow-up news. We talk about different composers on this show, and we like to keep track of what they're doing these days, if it ties into any stories related to the game industry. Let's start with Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair. It's coming to Xbox Game Pass today, as of time of the episode's release on May 10th. This is good because the first Danganronpa game was already there, but it looks like they're going to be slow rolling those out. So Danganronpa 2 coming. We've talked about that game on the show before. Unfortunately, Final Fantasy X and the X-2 remaster, they're leaving Game Pass on May 15th.
I have heard that the Game Pass version of Danganronpa 1 is rough, which is super weird because the PC version's not that rough.
It might as well be the same thing, right?
So I don't understand how that happened, but apparently it's a different version of the game, and it's apparently not super well put together. Maybe 2 will be better. Who knows? I hope so. Meanwhile, Yoko Shimomura has confirmed that she is involved in working with the Live Alive remake soundtrack. If you don't remember what that is, Live Alive is a Super Nintendo game. It was her first big project when she moved to Square. It was never released outside of Japan, or at least never released in North America. And it is getting a remake that comes out, I think, in July?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, and that is finally coming to North America for the first time. I'm very excited to hear her work on that game. I think it's going to be good. And we even have a couple of friends who say that that game is fantastic. So, looking forward to it.
Yeah, word came out today that they've apparently been working on that game for like 3 years. So they're putting in some good work into that remake. And yeah, Yoko Shimomura posts a picture of like how she's now working on the mastering work for the actual soundtrack release of it. So it's just neat to see her involved all these years later. Kevin Riepel, we've covered him for his work on the original Gears of War. He's still composing, of course, and recently he's been doing a lot of work for DC, specifically the DC Universe animated movies, and so he's composing for Green Lantern, Beware My Power, which releases on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital on July 26th, so good for Kevin Riepel.
Meanwhile, Yasunori Nishiki, apparently, he could finally announce that he composed the music for Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, which I think is a mobile game. I think
so.
Because an update finally added the credits.
Konami. Never change. Master Duel is apparently also on consoles.
Oh, nice.
It released in January of this year.
Why didn't it have credits from the start? You know what? It's Konami. It could be any number of reasons. At least he can mention it.
I'm happy for him. Great to hear his work continue after his amazing soundtrack on Octopath Traveler. And to round things out, for the last couple weeks, Joe and I have been playing video game music Hurdle. Of course, with Wordle and Hurdle and different daily game spin-offs that sort of take their place on the internet. Good on whoever created vgm-hurdle.glitch.me to do a daily video game music quiz. And then my fiance's, listen to me play this every morning in bed, and she's like, you should probably integrate that in your video game music podcast. I'm like, you know what? That's a great idea. So, Joe, I figure we try to give this a shot. We tried with the caveat that we do not play on recording day, and we see how it goes to, see if we can get it.
I've had, I think, one where I just couldn't figure it out at all, and I never would have gotten it. It was a game I had never played. But I think I've had two where I've had to go almost the entire 16-second clip just to figure out what it was. One of them I only knew because of this show being a song from Gravity Rush.
Yeah, it was Pleasure Quarter. It's good to hear some of those songs pop up every now and then. It's like, oh yeah, we did some good work covering. And it also gives us some interesting insight on games that we should be covering, one of which will be talked about next week. So, for example, all right, let's, if you know how this works, we're going to start with a 1-second audio clip of a song from a game that someone's put on this website. And if we can get it, we can guess it and, type it into this little text field. If not, we can skip it to, 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 6 seconds, 8, 16 for multiple guesses. Joe, are you ready?
As I'll ever be.
Here is the first second. Oh. Oh.
I got it already. I already have it.
Da-da-da, da-da-da-da. It's Donkey Kong Country. That's good old aquatic ambience there, right?
Yep, it sure is from Donkey Kong Country.
So we type it in and we get to see what is Donkey Kong Country. Oh, they got a few here from Donkey Kong Country games. Maybe I should just try to type aquatic ambience there. That's the better one there. All right.
Only one of the most famous water level songs ever written.
It sure is. And yeah, that's a real good one. So yeah, I feel like that's something we can do again. VGM-hurdle.glitch.me in case you'd like to play every day, but we'll try to do that on the show when we can on recording days.
Yeah, I think that would be. It'll probably be a little more fun when we hit ones that either only one of us knows or neither of us can figure out at first.
Yeah, and there's a Cave Story one. I think it was yesterday when we were recording. Like by 2 seconds, I had to guess that it might be Cave Story, but that's a soundtrack we got to get to eventually. But I hardly know that soundtrack, so I typed Cave Story, and there's like 6 options, and I guessed one at random, and it happened to be right. It was Moon Song. So
the worst one is still when Sonic Heroes was the song, because the first second of that song is silence.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That's not fair.
No, you got, not like when those happen. Anyway, we'll try to do that here on the show. It's a fun little mix up. But now let's talk about our first game this week. And it is the one, the only Metal Gear Solid. What is our history of talking about Metal Gear on this show? We talked about Metal Gear Solid 2 in episode 15, Metal Gear Solid 3 in episode 109, and Metal Gear Solid 5 in episode 55. So we go back to the original Metal Gear Solid. And again, another one where how has it taken us this long? That's a good question for such a formative game in the game industry. So, for some background reference, Metal Gear Solid is the third Metal Gear game under the direction of Hideo Kojima. And this would be following 1987's Metal Gear and 1990's Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, which were both released for Japan's MSX2 computer platform. So, for a fun fact, the Western NES port of Metal Gear and its sequel, Snake's Revenge, they have no involvement from Hideo Kojima. So, Metal Gear Solid, released on September 3rd, 1998 in Japan for PlayStation, and then it followed in North America on October 21st, 1998. Europe would get the game a few months later on February 22nd, 1999. There would be a PC version that would be released in late 2000, followed by a 2004 remake called Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes that was exclusive to Nintendo GameCube. The easiest way to play Metal Gear Solid today might be through the PlayStation 3, as Metal Gear Solid is available through the PlayStation Store, or through a voucher code in 2013's anthology, Metal Gear Solid: The Legacy Collection. But I guess it's also on that PlayStation Classic mini console that released in 2018. Remember that?
Barely.
Yeah, it didn't sell all that well. So It's on that, but yeah, people are, I think, realizing more and more as Konami is starting to get more restrictive on their digital rights management that like, oh yeah, the ways to play the first 4 mainline Metal Gear Solid games are dwindling more and more. Like 4 is about to be taken off of PlayStation Now in a week as of time of recording. So like it's getting tougher and tougher to play Kojima's masterpieces as intended. Metal Gear Solid was developed by Konami Computer Entertainment Japan and published by Konami. What is Metal Gear Solid? It is a third-person action game where the primary goal is to use stealth to move through a nuclear weapons facility while avoiding enemies, crawling under objects, ducking or hiding around walls, and making noise to distract enemies. Now, the franchise's shift to 3D allows for new ways to interact with the environment and enemies, but most gameplay still takes place with a top-down camera perspective and a simplified radar in the corner of the screen. Gameplay is frequently punctuated with cinematic cutscenes and codec radio conversations to deliver the game's story. And what is that game's story in one of those frequently cited complex video game narratives? So, in 2005, in the game's universe, the renegade genetically enhanced Special Forces unit, Foxhound, seizes control of a remote island in Alaska's Fox Archipelago, codenamed Shadow Moses, which houses a nuclear weapons disposal facility. Foxhound threatens to use the nuclear-capable mecha Metal Gear Rex, being secretly tested at the facility, against the U.S. government if they do not receive the remains of Big Boss, the antagonist of the previous Metal Gear games, and a ransom of $1 billion within 24 hours. Metal Gear protagonist and legendary soldier Solid Snake is forced out of retirement by Colonel Roy Campbell to infiltrate the island and neutralize the threat. Snake enters the facility via an air vent and locates a hostage, DARPA chief Donald Anderson. Anderson reveals that Metal Gear Rex can be deactivated with a secret detonation override code, but he suddenly dies of a heart attack before he can divulge more. And so begins the story of Metal Gear Solid. Big questions being, what is the cause of this seemingly random heart attack? Who is the leader of Foxhound, and can they be stopped? And can Solid Snake neutralize the threat of Metal Gear Rex? So, Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Metal Gear Solid?
I have never played the original Metal Gear Solid. I have only played Twin Snakes. And I've played Twin Snakes 3 times. Once entirely on stream for Smasterpieces, because that's the version of Metal Gear Solid that was the easiest for me to get a hold of and play on stream. It should be noted that we talked about this in the Smasterpieces episode, where it was really weird because I played Twin Snakes, but Matt played this one. He played the original. And we got to discuss and compare how, in terms of music specifically, Twin Snakes is way inferior.
Oh, yeah.
There was, I think it was the Blast Furnace that they took a place that had music in the original game and just replaced it with ambient noise. And that's a bummer.
I feel like the only good thing Twin Snakes does for its soundtrack is the boss fight music against Psycho Mantis.
Boss fight music against everybody, honestly. Everybody gets their own boss song instead of...
Right, true.
In the original, where they're mostly just encounter.
It's a different song, but yeah, we'll still talk about both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've never played the PS1 version. Even though I do own the Legendary Collection, and I'm pretty sure I did at one point install Metal Gear Solid 1. But I don't think I could go back to it after playing Twin Snakes and 2 and all that. Because they play so differently. And also, I don't really want to interact with Mei Ling's original voice.
Ooh, yeah. I'm the same exact way as you. Twin Snakes was my first exposure to the franchise, and I have never gone back and played the original as a result. So went from Twin Snakes to 2 and 3 and 4, etc. And yeah, I can really appreciate what the original Metal Gear Solid did for games and all that. But once you make improvements, and Twin Snakes being kind of based on the Metal Gear Solid 2 engine and the possibilities of like hanging and having a gauge and how long you can hang and things like that, some more detailed first-person gameplay, it's tough to go back to the original. And so I'll admire it from afar as something it did for the industry. But yeah, I grew up with and appreciated Twin Snakes more, even though you get all the bullet time cutscenes and then randomly Yoshi and Mario in the laboratory with Gray Fox. So, things like that, I'll definitely remember about this game. But it was good to learn about like the development history of it and some things I certainly didn't know. So let me convey this to you all out there. Metal Gear Solid was originally just going to be planned as like the third Metal Gear game by Hideo Kojima, and it was originally considered for the 3DO interactive multiplayer. And some pre-production work began while Kojima's game Policenauts was still in development. Joe, did you know that Meryl Silverberg is a character in Policenauts?
That somehow sounds familiar, and yet I'm pretty sure this is the first time I'm hearing that.
Like, name, character look, Yoji Shinkawa drawing, everything is like, oh, wow. And I guess there's some connection with Foxhound and like some other Policenauts related media, but like Meryl Silverberg, like, lift up and put it in this Metal Gear Solid game. So development started in 1995, and it also involved training from the Huntington Beach SWAT team in Southern California to get a sense of the weaponry and the action involved, and Kojima wanted to make the game as real and believable as possible in that regard. Of course, the late 90s and the Sony PlayStation, competing along with Nintendo 64, it was the time of 3D games. We've talked about this plenty of times before. But most developers found that, especially at the onset of this technology, games like this weren't easy to control. Somehow, Nintendo figured out the secret sauce with Super Mario 64, with The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, but it wasn't something that was easily picked up by most other developers. So the team at Konami decided, well, let's play off the strengths of the top-down 2D-like gameplay that we're generally familiar with, but include 3D graphics, and we'll also give the player the option to shift into a first-person perspective to look around, though it'll be at the cost of the character not being able to move. How did this get all planned out? Kojima used Lego building blocks and toy figurines to model 3D areas and see what the planned camera views could look like. And the game was developed by a staff of 20 people, which is a pretty small team for such a major title, especially at the time, but this allowed Kojima to interact more directly with each team member. According to character artist Yoji Shinkawa, Solid Snake's physique in this particular installment was based on Jean-Claude Van Damme, while his facial appearance was based on Christopher Walken. Which, yeah, I find that amusing, but also it'd be pretty hard to tell since the PlayStation didn't do the best job of rendering faces.
But why Walken specifically?
I don't know.
He was never the... Okay.
He's never the action hero type, but all right. What a weird mashup of Hollywood celebrities. Of course, the brand of Metal Gear was given a refresh because of the worldwide release focus, especially with this game. See, North America had no reference for the MSX2 games, and you had that port of the NES game, but it wasn't like the original vision. They only knew Metal Gear and Snake's Revenge. Europe only got the first game. So they took the word solid, not only derived from the codename for Solid Snake, as well as Solid Snake being in the title of the second MSX2 game. And it was also kind of plugged into Metal Gear there to not only represent that it was the third entry in the series, it continued the Metal Gear line, but also represent the transition from 2D to 3D computer graphics, so Metal Gear Solid. Jeremy Blaustein, that's a name I don't think I've mentioned before, except I brought up his name during the Shenmue episode last week because he worked as a localizer on that game, and he also worked on Metal Gear Solid. So he noted some localization changes in an interview where he said how Mei Ling's collection of Chinese proverbs that she rattles off on the save channel of the codec radio, some of these were difficult to adapt to English, so some Western-sourced quotes were added to kind of flesh that character and her knowledge out. Additionally, the famous sequence of the character Psycho Mantis reading the player's memory card and saying, "Oh, you like to play this, don't you?" Some of these games were also changed due to certain games like the Tokimeki Memorial series not being released outside of Japan.
I forgot that was one of the ones.
Apparently, there's also a cameo from Hideo Kojima where if the player has either Snatcher or Police Knots, or Snatcher and Police Knots on their memory card in the Japanese version, he thanks the player for supporting his work via a voiceover. And because these games are not available in the West, therefore Kojima's cameo is cut. I did not know about this Easter egg.
I also did not know about that one.
So yeah, pretty cool. Metal Gear Solid was shown for the first time at the 1996 Tokyo Game Show, followed by E3 1997, and the enthusiastic response to the game at E3 took Kojima by surprise and only increased his expectations for the game's performance in the American market. This also allowed for a big marketing push for PlayStation, as $8 million was spent to push Metal Gear Solid with game demo discs, TV and magazine advertisements, and more. The game reviewed very well when it came out with a Metacritic average of 94. It was praised in many aspects, as IGN considered it, quote, closer to perfection than any other game in PlayStation's action genre, calling it, quote, beautiful, engrossing, and innovative in every conceivable category. There were some slight criticisms, which included a steep learning curve for players who were new to stealth, as it's not really a guns blazing game. Plus, there were also some frame rate performance issues.
It's not a guns blazing game if I'm not the one playing it, or if I am bad at Metal Gear.
Yeah, if you get caught, it suddenly turns into one, and then you might have issues. Prior to the North American release, an estimated 12 million demos for the game were distributed in 1998. But despite low expectations, the game was a commercial success upon release. By early 2001, Metal Gear Solid had sold 6 million units worldwide, including 1 million units in Japan and approximately 5 million units in the US and Europe. Today, it has sold more than 7 million copies worldwide. It was nominated for 5 Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences awards. We know these as the DICE Awards, including Game of the Year, but it didn't win any. This was the year of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. That game won several of these that Metal Gear Solid was nominated for. It received an Excellence Award for Interactive Art at the 1998 Japan Media Arts Festival. It was PlayStation Game of the Year at many outlets, including Electronic Gaming Monthly, and it is often regarded as one of the best games for the original PlayStation. Metal Gear Solid, along with its sequel, Metal Gear Solid 2, was featured at the Smithsonian American Art Museum's exhibition, The Art of Video Games, in 2012. I mean, my gosh, what is Metal Gear Solid's legacy? Well, it inspired stealth game franchises like Splinter Cell and Assassin's Creed, and its cinematic style continues to influence modern action games. And of course, with Metal Gear Solid's worldwide acclaim, the franchise continued with sequels, from 2001's Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty for PlayStation 2, all the way through 2015's Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain for PlayStation 4. Unfortunately, ever since Hideo Kojima was forced out of Konami, the franchise's potential for continuation is bleak. But rumors pop up every now and then for a possible modern remake of the original Metal Gear Solid. Oh, could Blue Point Games do it? Oh, that'd be cool. And it happens every now and then. It's just one of those, oh, maybe one day that'll be a thing that happens.
If you wish upon a star, doesn't matter who you are.
And there's also that whole Hollywood movie that's in pre-production that's starring Oscar Isaac as Solid Snake. But who knows when that will become a finished product.
I'm personally, out of pessimism, gonna go ahead and guess not ever.
I mean, I guess they're looking for a script. It's nice that Oscar Isaac is a big fan of the franchise. I think he'd do a great job, but yeah, a lot of things got to come together. If the Uncharted movie took so long to happen, yeah, Metal Gear Solid's been one that's been kicked down the road for quite some time. So, yeah. The composer that we'll talk about today for Metal Gear Solid is Tappi Iwase. Ah, yes. Well, Tappi Iwase was born on March 7th, 1967, in Toyohashi, in Aichi, Japan. He has also gone by the alias Tappi, in all caps, Tappy, as opposed to his Tappi first name. He's also a drummer, in addition to being a composer. He started playing the drums at 14 years old, but he was initially exposed to music with learning piano at age 4. He moved to the United States in 1988, and he graduated from the Dick Grove School of Music in Los Angeles, specializing in composition, arrangement, and percussion, before going back to Japan to work at Konami. He's also worked as a summer seminar lecturer in percussion instrument and music theory for 5 years at the Akiyoshidai International Art Village in Yamaguchi Prefecture. He seemingly does a lot of drumming work these days, less so on the composition front, especially after he left Konami. You can follow him on Twitter at Tappi Iwase. So, Tappi Iwase composed at Konami for Contra 3 The Alien Wars, Police Knots, Suikoden, and Metal Gear Solid. More recently, he's performed the drums for Final Fantasy XIII, Gravity Rush 2, and last year's Nier Replicant remake. So the historical development research on Metal Gear Solid involves most of the score being composed by Konami's in-house musicians, and that would be the KCE Sound Team Japan, KCE Konami Computer Entertainment. So this would include Kazuki Muraoka, Hiroyuki Togo, Takanari Ishiyama, Lee Jong-myung, and Maki Kirioka. Oftentimes on different soundtrack releases, it's often that Kazuki Muraoka and Maki Kirioka were like the primary credited musicians, but the other musicians at the KCE Sound Team for Japan were also getting looped into the credits. It's just different information points from different locations, tough to kind of narrow it down. The music that's played in-game has a synthetic feel, with increased pace and the introduction of strings during tense moments, along with a looping style that was especially endemic to video games at the time. Then you would have overtly cinematic music with stronger orchestral and choral elements that would appear in the cinematic cutscenes. We cannot talk about the original Metal Gear Solid without talking about the controversy involved with this game and with Tappi Iwase, who is most notable for composing the Metal Gear Solid main theme, the theme song for the franchise that would get used in the first game, the second game, the third game even. It's the da 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 da, like famous video game theme, as we'll certainly get to in the Critical 5 shortly. But in the mid-2000s, shortly before the release of 2006's Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops on PSP, a video posted on YouTube shows Hideo Kojima being presented with a recording of Georgy Sviridov's Winter Road. And it's a track from the 1975 classical work Snowstorm, musical illustrations after Pushkin for orchestra. It also gets referred to as Pushkin's Garland is like the main thing, but Snowstorm, Winter Road is the track. And you can definitely hear that it has a similar sounding musical passage there. And Kojima's presented with this, and it's like, oh, geez, we didn't know about this, and it's kind of all flustered. And so Konami, rightly so, approached this very sensitively after saying that, like, oh yeah, some Russian guys said that we stole their music, and so they did not allow the theme to return in portable ops, and especially in 2008's Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots. It's been a hot button issue ever since. The Metal Gear Solid 2 version of the theme that Harry Gregson Williams adapted was supposed to appear in Super Smash Bros. Brawl in 2008, but data miners discovered, this got cut. That's probably a big reason why. Even still, the Metal Gear Solid soundtrack was released on September 23rd, 1998, under the King Records label. Just something we had to touch on, Joe. Obviously, it's one of those famous game industry stories when it comes to potential plagiarism.
I think it's kind of silly. I understand Konami's response of like, look, we just don't want to get sued. It's easier to just not use the song anymore.
Yeah, it's not direct, but there's enough smoke there that, yeah, if they don't want a legal problem, then it's best to just cut ties with it.
Like, I don't think there's actually a plagiarism problem here, but yeah, I understand the reaction, I guess.
But we'll still have this theme open up our conversation of the 5 critical tracks for Metal Gear Solid, because what would it be without talking about Metal Gear Solid main theme? Again, just a legendary video game track, the main theme for Metal Gear Solid, certainly. Also used in early trailers for the game, so definitely a connection was made early on with this theme, with this franchise that was hotly anticipated for Sony PlayStation. It can also play during the end credits on a third playthrough, supposedly, so that's neat. But yeah, just the dun 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 dun. Like, it's such a good motif and just an energizing beat that really gets driven behind it. And of course, a theme that would inspire other, leitmotifs and throughout the franchise, not only the game, but throughout the franchise. I mean, the You Are Dead sort of jingle in a way. It's a classic theme, and you can say what you will with this being composed by Tappi Iwase. It didn't seem to have any connection whether, he stopped composing around the mid-2000s because of this, but it definitely raises some eyebrows, but I still don't think it takes away from how important this piece is to this franchise, especially moving it forward for sequels to come. And
I'm not used to hearing this in PS1 style midis. Usually when I hear this song, it sounds at least relatively orchestrated.
Yeah, like it would in the second game with Harry Gregson Williams. But I think it's important to note that the midis here on PS1 sound amazing.
They sound better than some of the other midis on PS1 I have heard, at the very least.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's a different sort of aesthetic to hear this theme in. I'll give it that. I think that the arrangement in 2 is still the best this theme has ever been, but I mean, it's good to hear the origins at least.
Absolutely. Important to hear how this all started. The other especially famous piece from this game, as it gets used in memes and the like, is the theme when you kind of fail at the stealth, and that would be number 2 on the Critical 5 here. This is Encounter. So when you're like me and Joe, and you're not so good at the stealth in Metal Gear Solid, and you get spotted a lot with that and the red exclamation point pops up, and all those guards are coming after you, this music plays a lot, especially if you are not as good at the game. This is the You've Been Spotted Encounter theme, and it takes a while for that to dwindle down and kind of go back to the low ambiance of the environment that you're in. But yeah, what a piece that, again, like, borrows a lot from the pace and vibe of the main theme. So again, it's just really iconic for the franchise. And again, you'll hear this be used when people reference Metal Gear Solid, or you've been spotted by the guards. Like, it's, again, one of those classic video game pieces. I think musically similar to the main theme in a lot of ways, kind of borrowing the instruments, the feel, the percussion, but just doing it in a different way. And then especially when it kind of goes in the longer drawn out chords, like kind of just, I gotta have it, bring it place to, again, loop back to, especially when you're not doing a good job at hiding again. So again, Encounter, a classic piece here, had to be here.
My first exposure to the song was the Brawl remix of it.
Oh, sure.
Really, really, really good. And it should show just how iconic this song is to the franchise, that is the song that was in Snake's trailer. Not when he was announced for Smash, because he was announced for Smash at the start, but when he finally got like a formal trailer of like Snake joins the Brawl, this is the song that was used for it.
Right.
And for good reason. It's very, very good. And it's very memorable, and I don't think it's in Twin Snakes.
I don't think it is either. That's a really good point. Maybe they just wanted to kind of get away from it a little bit. That's really interesting. And it's supposedly composed by Kazuki Muraoka. One that's composed by Kazuki Muraoka and Maki Kirioka, though, is this piece, taking on a totally different direction, number 3 on the Critical 5. This is Mantis's Hymn. So this is the theme that plays when you're in the area of the domain of one Psycho Mantis who has telekinetic powers. And wow, a totally different change of pace compared to the first 2 critical tracks, as this one's choral midis that are kind of drawn out in this long piece. But it's not only meant to be Psycho Mantis's theme. In universe, it's supposed to be his mind control music. And so it'd be something that you would hear as you fall under his spell, as Meryl does. And, the instruments of the choral, voices may not be the best, but I love the chords that they build and represent here, and how it just grows and expands, then shrinks back down. It's just a really cool piece that, I feel like in the battle against Psycho Mantis in the Twin Snakes version, it gets, played up well with some EDM kind of backbeating, but the foundation of the Mantis Hymn piece is so good. And I just love the simple chords that are building and just sound so rich.
Yeah, this being one of the few songs from this game that actually did move over to Twin Snakes shows that they were pretty sure that they got it right the first time. And I do think they got it right the first time. I agree with the vocal midis being, 1998.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it makes up for it just with how they're implemented and how they're sort of put together to sound a little bit better than they actually are. It's pretty impressive, honestly.
Yeah, the harmonics just kind of building off each other. It's really neat. Really, really good stuff. Again, we swing drastically to the other side of things, and this is more of the what plays during these cinematic cutscenes. How can we make this game more like a Hollywood movie? That would be number 4 on the Critical 5, and this would be Enclosure.
What am I fighting for? What are you fighting for?
Snake, can love bloom on a battlefield? This plays during that long, infamous cutscene where Snake has just defeated Sniper Wolf, who his Snake's pal Otacon has been pining for secretly. And Snake, how could you do that? I loved her! But there's the big melodramatic tension of oh no, it's okay. I did what I needed to do. Goodbye, and oh boo-hoo Otacon. So this is just playing up the sad nature of war and what has to go on during Sniper Wolf's fate here.
It's especially funny to remember their relationship because it essentially amounts to, what about me? What about you?
Yeah.
She doesn't care.
She doesn't really know that you exist, honestly.
This seems really good, and this song is a big part of why.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the piece starts with just, piano, and then it just builds and more, adding orchestra in there. And again, really good midis for the PlayStation. When they try to hit these moments and like the big orchestra sound, like it's really done well here. It's just, certain instruments here and there, chorals that are not the best, but for the time, I think this is a powerful moment to kind of, not only was just the game a whole example, but like this scene, you could see like the foundations of how games since then have tried to take cinematic moments for their games and try to build their stories off of that.
And also, this is just the closest to a Hollywood song that they could probably get on the PS1.
Oh, yeah, and you can definitely hear those foundations, and I'm sure the team is super proud of that. I think it definitely sent ripples throughout the industry. You can hear those foundations here. Number 5 on their Critical 5, of course, we have to wrap up with this one, and this would be The Best Is Yet to Come. Whereas Enclosure was composed by Maki Kirioka, this one is composed by Rika Muranaka. The Best Is Yet to Come is the end credits theme of Metal Gear Solid, and it features Gaelic lyrics sung by Aoife Niarai. That's going to be my best guess at Irish name there. Boy, we always have trouble with those on this show, don't we? I guess I did not know that it was Gaelic. Maybe I had thought it was like Hebrew for a while. I don't know. But yeah, the song was recorded at Beach Park Studio in Ireland. And it does have translations out that I think play in subtitles on the screen, if I recall correctly. But this is, again, one of those classic video game ending themes. I feel like on my personal list of Metal Gear ending themes, it's not that high, but people definitely have a big nostalgia reverence for The Best Is Yet to Come. And it's a great song. The vocal performance is incredible. But for me, it just doesn't hit those high notes because I don't have that original experience playing with it. Even though it is in Twin Snakes, it never hit me the same way, I guess.
Oh, this is my favorite Metal Gear credit song.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, a lot of it I think is just the inclusion of violin. It's not in the clip, but there's like a really, really good violin solo later on in the song. That's a big part of it. I think the vocals are just absolutely gorgeous. 'Cause I like other Metal Gear credit songs. Like, I think second place is probably Can't Say Goodbye to Yesterday, obviously.
That's my favorite, yeah.
But yeah, The Best Is Yet to Come is my favorite one in general. It's the one I enjoy listening to the most. I love it.
And it definitely had to be here to wrap up their Critical 5. Got a couple here on the cutting room floor, though. And this first one is the aforementioned boss theme that plays against all of the bosses in Metal Gear Solid. It would be Duel. Very, very similar to Encounter. This track is composed by Kazuki Muraoka and Maki Kirioka. But yes, this plays as the boss theme. I feel like a lot of people remember it most against the fights with Revolver Ocelot and Grey Fox. A lot of comments and quotes from those characters in the YouTube comments. I mean, you could have picked ones like, the Hind D track. That's another one where Snake's taking on a Hind D. And okay, but this is one that you'll hear a lot and just kind of builds off of the Encounter theme by adding a little bit of a quicker pace and adding a couple more instruments there. So just an important one for rounding out the Metal Gear Solid experience, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's very similar to Encounter. It shares a lot of the same bits and pieces that Encounter borrows from the main theme, obviously. Like we mentioned earlier, I think that's like the one good thing that Twin Snakes does better is everybody gets their own boss theme. Sniper Wolf gets a really good boss theme in that game.
That is a great one. You're right. I forgot about that one.
But it's just this in the original Metal Gear Solid. So, they did one right thing on the soundtrack of that remake. Thanks, guys. But yeah, it's a fine song. It's really, really close to Encounter.
It is. And then the other one that stood out to me is VR Training. Oh, you mean Metal Gear's theme of Tara, which was originally composed by Iku Mizutani. Granted, a different arrangement here, but this theme of Tara, a great theme, I might add. I love its interpretation in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. But this one here is used for the VR training mode, which gives you some extra practice in stealth, and if you get to master it, you get to do some speedrunning stuff against those for some more fun to expand your Metal Gear Solid gameplay. And then this mode was also expanded in the PC release, which was Metal Gear Solid Integral, So yeah, VR training pretty important, and then it uses like the most famous theme from Kojima's original Metal Gear games on MSX2. So good to include in here because I don't think we're ever going to go back to those to cover on the show.
This arrangement sounds like a Final Fantasy dungeon, though.
It does, doesn't it? And it kind of goes back to like those Final Fantasy VII midis in a way, I think.
Like, it's really, really weird to hear this song. Just be like, no, this feels like I should be controlling Terra walking through a dungeon right now. What? Okay, sure. I mean, it's fine. I don't think any version of Theme of Terra is gonna be better than the Brawl remix of it, which is incredible.
What will I never forget about Metal Gear Solid? I feel like, if anything, the things I remember are from the Twin Snakes, and I know that doesn't do the original game any favors, but honestly, just remembering it for starting a legend. I know you can go back and say the original Metal Gear games did that, but Metal Gear Solid took it into a stratosphere, not only for kind of codifying how games can be cinematic and how you can interact that with the gameplay, the things like the Psycho Mantis fight and the ideas that Hideo Kojima had. So many neat things about Metal Gear Solid made me a big fan of the franchise, at least the Twin Snakes interpretation. I'm sure if I played the original back in the day, I'm sure that would have too. But to then follow the franchise and its tumultuous history, it's one of the best in games, I think, as far as telling a narrative throughout several games. It's one of my favorites, at least.
Yeah, I really like Twin Snakes, despite its flaws, which it is a very flawed remake. I will give people that. It makes some changes that aren't great in the grand scheme of things, except I like being able to shoot cameras, and I don't care that breaks the difficulty. I don't care. But, because you can't do that in the original. Matt learned that firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
But I respect the PS1 game for not only starting the Metal Gear Solid series. Like, yeah, the first two Metal Gear games started the Metal Gear series, but no, they didn't. Metal Gear Solid started the Metal Gear series.
Yeah.
Let's be real. Let's be honest. May it rest in peace.
Yeah. Yeah, I always do have hopes when you see the rumors pop up of like Blue Point doing Metal Gear Solid. I hope.
See, I need to hope that they do Silent Hill 2 and 3 so those can be playable again.
Oh, right. Yeah, those two. I mean, just give Blue Point all the things. Sony, you own them now. Throw all the money at them. Let's go. Buy some rights from Konami. To transition to our next game, let's talk about a fan cover, a fan remix, whether it's on YouTube, OC Remix, wherever. Squid Physics over on YouTube has his take of the Metal Gear Solid main theme, and he plays all these instruments to make them sound like the MIDIs do. It's really interesting. So it sounds like pretty loyal, but he's actually playing all these instruments, like all the percussion stuff. It's so cool. Really like how it sounds. So please enjoy that. We'll be right back.
Alright, so we talked about this really influential stealth game. Now let's talk about a game that I've heard of and none of you have. Again. I keep finding them, baby. And I've wanted to talk about this game for a very long time. And I'll get into why I'm only just now talking about it later. But for now, let's talk about Dandy Dungeon, Legend of Brave Yamada. This game actually started as a mobile game that was released on iOS and Android on January 13th, 2017, but it later would come out for Switch and PC on June 27th, 2019. It is developed and published by Onion Games, and if you don't know who Onion Games is, well, we're going to get to that, because maybe you should know who Onion Games is. The story of Brave Yamada is simple. Yamada is a 36-year-old programmer working for a major games company, and he absolutely hates it. One day, he loses his job and decides that he'll get his revenge by making his own game, and that game will become super successful. This game ends up being a dungeon-crawling RPG where he's the hero, called Brave Yamada. One day, he meets his new neighbor, a young woman named Maria, and he immediately falls in love. In the hopes of manifesting love with her in the real world, he programs her into his game as Princess Maria, whom the brave hero must rescue. Remember, in video games, this is not a red flag, but in real life, that is a red flag. When the executives at his former workplace get wind of Yamada's work, they sneak into his home and sabotage his game, filling it with bugs and enemies that Yamada must overcome. So, the questions as they are presented by the description on the Switch eShop, because I couldn't put it better, quote, will Yamada-kun and Maria-chan find love? Is destiny pre-programmed or randomly generated? Is love a bug or a feature? Main gameplay in Dandy Dungeon it's basically a puzzle game, essentially, a puzzle RPG. So you're given a 5x5 grid, and this grid is populated by enemies and obstacles. And basically what you have to do is you have to trace a path for Yamada to follow along all of these tiles, and you can only walk on each tile one time before it crumbles behind Yamada and you can no longer access it. If Yamada encounters an enemy on his path, they will then take turns attacking each other until one of them is dead. Hopefully the enemy, for your sake. And Yamada takes a bit of damage for each tile that's left when he reaches the exit of the level. So you have an infinite amount of time to look at the grid and decide, all right, this is the path I'm going to use. But the instant you start actually tracing it in game, then you start to have a time limit for, no, make a decision now. And the goal is basically to find and trace a path for Yamada to follow, ideally having him step on every tile all the way to the end of that floor of the dungeon. And that's basically the gist of Dandy Dungeon. There's equipment that you can get and upgrade and all that, and there's also, like experience, and unfortunately there's grinding involved. I would recommend, if you are going to play it on Switch or PC. I don't actually know if it's still available on phones. It should be, but the Switch or PC version is a $25 game that has everything in it from the start, unlike the mobile version, which is a free-to-play game with all the trappings of a free-to-play mobile game. So, that's a thing. But, yeah. That's pretty much the gist of it. So here's where I will ask, again, the question I already know the answer to. What are our experiences with Dandy Dungeon, Peter?
Outside of seeing it get pushed back on the original Soundchat schedule for a couple of years now, as you mentioned, I didn't know what this game was. I'm interested to learn about it, though. I feel like I've heard about Onion Games before, so that's an interesting connection. And then looking up art for this game to, kind of start piecing things together for production on this episode. Oh, this game's logo is just Dragon Quest.
It's just Dragon Quest, but the hero's in his underwear.
Wonderful.
It is very, very open about what games it is inspired by and referencing and parodying and all that. I love this game. I first played it on mobile. It is probably the first mobile game where I paid money for microtransactions and didn't regret it. So that's pretty cool, because I did finish it. I got to the end of the game. I also own it on Switch, but I haven't beaten it on Switch, which is an issue for a reason we'll talk about later that I really should resolve. The reason that it kept getting pushed back is because I really wanted to talk about this game. I wanted to talk about this game for a long time. The soundtrack was nowhere? Nowhere. Except for the only listing I could find was for a physical CD that was out of print, only sold in Japan in 2018.
What in the world?
And so at one point I was like, no, screw it. I'll load it up on Switch and I'll record the music myself. And then I never did that. And then just on a whim about a month ago, I tweeted at Onion Games, like responded to one of their tweets being like, hey, is there any place or any way you might release the Dandy Dungeon soundtrack for somebody that might want to get a hold of it? And they were like, oh, we actually did that in 2021. So I bought it. And now here we are. I can talk about it now.
Putting your money where your mouth is.
Hell yeah, baby. So that's been fun. I'm excited to bring this to people's forethoughts, though I can't tell you a lot about the development of this game because there's no information on it. But you know what there is information on? The developer, Onion Games. So let's talk about Onion Games, because I don't know if we're going to talk about them again in any time in the future. Who knows, though? So, according to the Onion Games website, the studio is headed up by two main figures who both have various experiences in the AAA sector of the industry. They are a Japanese indie studio, a small team, but they are headed up by director and designer Yoshiro Kimura, who was the dungeon map designer on Romancing Saga 2, combat battle designer on Romancing Saga 3, and was also a producer on both No More Heroes and No More Heroes 2. And then there's also art director Kurashima Kazuyuki, who was a character designer on Live Alive, Super Mario RPG, and Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land.
Yeah.
Which Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land explains a lot about this game. So, and those are just the games that I recognized on there. There were some titles that I was not super familiar with, but these two have been in the industry for a real long time. Onion Games mostly specializes in quirky games like Dandy Dungeon. They've also released games like Million Onion Hotel, Blackbird, and most recently, in December of 2021, they released a game called Mon Amour. They're also the studio that was behind the 2021 re-release of the PS1 RPG Moon, which happened, I think, 2 years ago. Yeah.
Yep, that's where I know their name.
And as far as I'm aware, Kimura actually was on the original dev team for Moon, which is how that ended up happening.
Okay.
So they also currently hold the IP rights to the obscure PS2 titles Tulip, which I only know of because of the time when I used to watch Game Grumps, and Rule of Rose, which I know as a horror game that you cannot find or emulate anywhere nowadays. And they've said they're working on possibly re-releasing these two games, and God, I hope they do. I want to play Rule of Rose. They are currently developing an RPG, apparently, but have no real idea as to when it will be finished and released, according to an interview with Kimura in December of last year that I was able to find. That's one of the things they brought up when they were talking about Tulip and Rule of Rose, because the main thought there was we don't know how long this RPG is going to take, but we have to put out something or the money's going to stop coming in and then the lights will turn off. So I'm hoping that we do see a re-release of those two games. Hopefully soon, but apparently Moon took 3 or 4 years to get figured out and ported to Switch and all that. So who knows? A quote from the website that I really liked was, "Even though we are a very tiny team of onions, we are happily creating new video games." Thanks, guys. They started out making mobile games, but they have actually recently stepped away from mobile with the way the economy on that platform has sort of formed. Kimura was talking about in that interview about how, I don't really see a way that we can viably survive on that platform anymore, so we're going to focus on PC and Nintendo Switch pretty much exclusively from here on. When asked to, and this is a real question the interviewer asked him, quote, "Pick a fruit or vegetable to compare each of your games to," Kimura said, quote, "Dandy Dungeon is a sweet potato because Maria-chan loves sweet potatoes." What a weird question to ask a man. But also, I guess this is the person, it's this and Keita Takahashi. Those are probably the two people you can ask that question and get an answer. It had generally favorable reviews when it came out, though there weren't many of them. It has a 78 for the Switch version on Metacritic, so more mixed there. The mobile version has a 91, but that's only from 4 reviews in general, and the PC has gotten 1 review total, so it does not have a Metacritic score. A lot of those reviews, though, they praised the game's wacky and bizarre humor, but they did criticize that the gameplay is overall kind of repetitive. It doesn't really evolve past what it is in the first couple hours, so be aware of that. There is technically a sequel. And I say technically because Dandy Dungeon 2, The Phantom Bride, was not released as its own game. It was actually added onto the original game as part of a massive free update that released in spring of 2020. They just attached it to the original game for free. I haven't played that part, and that's why I need to get back to it on Switch and get further. So the composer that we're going to talk about for this game is Keiichi Sugiyama. Now, I need to make sure that I stress, we are not talking about Koichi Sugiyama. That is a different bad man that we probably won't talk about on this show. At least I don't have any plans to ever talk about him. He was the main composer behind Dragon Quest. He passed away last year, and as far as I'm aware, nobody was sad about it.
Yeah, we're going to pass on that one, yeah.
Yeah. But Keiichi Sugiyama was born on January 1st, 1965 in Hakodate, Hokkaido, Japan. He also has 2 pseudonyms, being Fiber Jelly and Sugiyama with an exclamation point, which the second one's my favorite. He is a former employee of Sega, but as far as I can tell, he works freelance mostly now. Most people, if they are familiar with his work, would be familiar with it because he is the main composer for Rez and Rez Infinite. Something I did not know before I started researching this game. He is also credited as a composer on Daytona USA 2001, Blink's The Time Sweeper, Sonic Heroes, as well as being an arranger on Shadow the Hedgehog, Lumines, No More Heroes 2, Hatsune Miku Project Diva, Super Monkey Ball 3D, Mario and Sonic at the London 2012 Olympic Games, specifically the Wii version of that game, Dandy Dungeon, of course, Team Sonic Racing, and most recently he again worked with Onion Games to the music for their most recent game, Mon Amour. So that's a hell of a lineup, to be honest, but like, Rez and Rez Infinite.
That is, surprising.
That is not a name I expected to see pop up during this episode, but here we are. In terms of historical development research, I don't really have anything, but the eShop listing also talks about the 2 composers that were on this game, describing them as Keiichi Sugiyama, quote, the comic prince of chiptunes, and, quote, Anka Boss's founder and singer, Karinho Fujiwara. There are also some guest tracks that were added in the sequel update. They were composed by Nobuo Uematsu, whom we have talked about several times on this show, and Zune, the composer behind Touhou, whom we talked about in episode 126. Alright, let's get into the soundtrack that I've wanted to talk about for a while. Let's talk about the 5 critical tracks for Dandy Dungeon Legend of Brave Yamada, and we're going to actually start with my favorite song on the soundtrack, and one of the main reasons why I wanted to cover this game. Let's talk about Retrograde Life.
Fa, 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 fa. Fa 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 fa. You say I'm just a punk and useless junk. I'll say I can hang on just a little bit more.
This is the main theme and the title screen song of the game. It plays on the title screen. This is the English version, of course. There is a Japanese version that played originally, but I like the English version the best. The vocals were done by, and again, this is a quote from the eShop listing, quote, Mystery Singer Nagasa Bonus. I don't know who that is. I can't find who that is. I'm not entirely convinced he's real, but he does a pretty good job on this song. I don't know. I think this song is weirdly emotionally effective for a game where the main character spends a lot of time in his underwear and is programming a video game and might be the weirdest man in the world. But I really, really like this song. It's nothing like the rest of the soundtrack, but I think that makes it stand out.
Yeah, not what I expected to have the piece open with. Fa, 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 fa. I could see it being the title screen theme, oddly enough, when it's about a man who's developing his own RPG to get back at the system. Yeah, I can see why this would be your favorite. It's definitely different than most of the songs we've ever covered on the show before.
The title screen I just really love because it's Yamada and his younger coworker, I forget his name, Shimada maybe? I don't remember. Drunk as hell walking up to Yamada's door, stumbling back and forth while Maria looks out her window at them, which is great. I absolutely adore that title screen, and this song is a very big part of that. Anyways, let's get to how the rest of the game sounds, and it's really low key, but I have to talk about this song because you're going to hear it a good amount. Critical track number 2 is Carefree Yamada-kun. This is the music that's playing when you are not playing Yamada's RPG, basically the quote-unquote main menu of the game. It's just in his apartment. And this is the song that plays. And every once in a while you'll hear Yamada start typing. That's it. That's the whole thing. And I think this really kind of fits the sort of mundanity of that scenario. Mm-hmm. I think it does a really good job at that, but it's just this really low-key piece that I have found myself keeping on for a little bit a few times. It's a really, really, really short loop. Just like the next one's also a really, really short loop, but I still consider it a very important song for the game.
Yeah, it establishes the environment. I could definitely hear that for sure. I get big Earthbound vibes from it.
Yeah.
Granted, a lot of the instruments, kind of tapping into the 8-bit nature there, but like the feeling of the music and what it's trying to capture, I feel like it's trying to get that real life vibe that, it just makes me think of the Mother franchise for sure.
Yamada would fit in the Mother franchise so well, it's terrifying to think about.
Yeah, I could see that.
I would not be surprised to find out that Earthbound was 100% one of this game's inspirations. Critical track number 3, another one of those very short loops, but this one you're especially going to hear at key parts of the game. This is Programming Hustle. This song is way too catchy. It's not fair, especially considering it is a super short loop. But this song basically plays when something happens and Yamada is now mad, or he's had a great idea for the game and he is furiously programming it into the game, and that means a new feature or mechanic has been added to the actual dungeon crawling section of the game. I don't know how else to explain it, but I really like this high energy sort of chip tune, whatever the hell it is, when you think about how it's he's just he programmed in the ability for you to wear armor. How exciting. Good job, dude. But I have not forgotten this song a single time in the past 6 years, so it has to be here.
Oh, it's definitely infectious and definitely a front runner for my favorite here. But it does have a good positive burst of energy. But you're right. I think with the loop, it just feels like it's short lasting, and it's just gotta act on it now. Gotta put the idea in. Although come to think of it, this soundtrack just gets better and better, and it's really interesting to hear. I hope people have been enjoying kind of hearing it ramp up.
But my favorite aspect, we haven't even gotten to my favorite aspect of the sound design in this game and the music and all that, which is shown off in critical track number 4, Wonder Bad Battle. Why, yes, that is a man's voice. Just sort of... I love it. This is not the only song where that is a thing. That shows up all over the soundtrack. But I like to think that is Yamada humming along to his own music as he's testing his game.
Has to be.
This song plays when you get onto a level of the dungeon where the boss is located. So it's the last floor of that quest that you're currently doing. When it first starts, you get this really good clip of Yamada's voice. It's him basically announcing that you're at the boss, and it's just him, danger, 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 danger zone. Then the song starts. It's great. Danger zone. It is fantastic. That happens all over the soundtrack. It's the funniest part of it, the most quirky and the most unique, honestly. It's hard not to be charmed by that kind of thing. And I absolutely adore it. It's great.
It definitely reminds me of someone singing along if an RPG battle theme gets repetitive or annoying and you're kind of humming along as it's going about. But if it's him composing and creating his own game, that's definitely the vibe I got to, and I'm glad that seems to be what it's emulating. So well done to them. That's, again, not something you hear replicated on a game soundtrack very often or at all.
Yeah, it's fun. And let's do another boss theme. This one from much later in the game. This is critical track number 5, Ferocious Ayanokoji Boss Fight. Ayanokoji is the chairman of the company that Yamada used to work for. He's the one that hires the person to sabotage the game, who programs him and the other executives that work under him as bosses in the game that Yamada has to beat to debug the game. Essentially how it goes. It doesn't make sense, but it doesn't have to. This is the final boss, phase 1. And one of my favorite things about this song, and one of the main reasons why I put this one, is that dun 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 da da da. That is actually a leitmotif that plays in every single regular dungeon area in the game, to some extent. Not on like boss floors, like in the regular floors. So to hear that come back in a boss theme is really neat, honestly. And I think it's a really cool sort of shout out to the journey you've taken to get here or whatever. And that's, I think, the main reason why I really, really dig this song. It's also way more epic than a game like this should be.
It absolutely is. And I think that really makes it stand out, because we've just been hearing, some 8-bit stuff and but now you're getting like, oh, this could fit for a final boss in a video game. Like it's very representative of what you'd expect in a JRPG in like a Square Enix setting, let's say. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's emulated especially well there.
Yeah. For tracks on the cutting room floor, I got 2, and let's talk about what I think might actually be the weirdest song on this list. This is Flower Song, Maria. As one might guess, this is Maria's theme. I really like this song because the personality of the game sort of shines through, and it's very clearly supposed to be Yamada's like inner monologue of he hears this song when he sees Maria. It should be noted, Yamada needs to install a lock on his door, because every single NPC in this game, all of the scenes take place in his apartment, with people just sort of bursting through the door, Maria included. I think one of the first times you meet Maria, she like bursts through his door and is like, "I'm Maria. I really like sweet potatoes." And then she leaves. This game's really weird. I recommend it heartily. But this song, I think, is unique. And I like it mostly for that.
I think you and I have different definitions of weird. When we've had songs with fa 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 and da 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 da. But I think it replicates, you're right, what he hears in his head with a woman singing her own theme.
Oh, I don't think that's a woman singing.
Cool.
I think that's the same dude. I'm pretty sure. I think that might be Keiichi Sugiyama.
Fantastic. Love it.
Just doing a falsetto. I'm pretty sure. I don't know for sure. The releases, if you go look at them on VGMDB, they don't actually have information on who did what, which is unfortunate. But I'm pretty sure that's him.
Or maybe it's this mysterious Nagasa bonus.
It might be, honestly. Whoever he is, may he rest in peace. He's not dead. What the hell am I saying? I don't think he's dead. I can't say that with authority. Second track of the cutting room floor is also one of my favorites just for how absolutely catchy it is. This is Congratulations. This is the song that plays when you have successfully completed a dungeon. It's got this really triumphant feel to it. It's got a really catchy melody to it. I really, really dig this song a lot. This is another one of those where, like, years later, I still start whistling it sometimes. So I needed to put it on here somewhere.
Yeah, it does sound triumphant, like you did it. So, mission accomplished.
So what will I never forget about Dandy Dungeon? This game's weird. It's really weird. But, like, it's weird in that Katamari way where it's just super charming. Or you brought up the comparison to Earthbound Mother at one point. It's charming in a lot of the same ways as those games as well. I think it kind of nails it, even though, like, in real life, Yamada's a bit of a creep. Just a tad.
Just a bit.
But I think the game, like, pokes fun at him for that multiple times. So at least they're aware. But it's a fun game. The gameplay is not, like, incredible, but the aesthetic and the tone and all the writing in the game, in my opinion, is enough to boost it up to being pretty good. Is this a game I think you should rush out to the eShop right now, buy it, play it immediately? No, not really. But I hope I convince at least a couple of people to give this game a shot, because I know some people in particular that would probably really enjoy this game.
I don't think I could have compared this game to Metal Gear Solid. But you know what? One man against the world while questioning if love can bloom on the battlefield. That's a pretty appropriate comparison between the two games here. Metal Gear Solid and Dandy Dungeon, Legend of Brave Yamada. That will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at Pete Speakeasy. Joe is over at String Pixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but it's that MP3 podcast version that you want, and that's hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's where Joe's other podcast, Masterpieces, is hosted, and you can find Masterpieces and Original Soundchat wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify, where we have a feed of podcast episodes, but we also have a Spotify playlist of video game music, where if we talk about a video game music track and it's on Spotify, it gets added to this big monster playlist. Joe, is anything being added this week?
Unfortunately, neither of these soundtracks are on Spotify. Dandy Dungeon doesn't surprise me, and Metal Gear, I assume, is not there for the same reason that 2 and 3 also are not on Spotify, being the whole plagiarism thing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna assume that's the reason. I did want to make an addendum to last week. Shenmue is on Spotify and is on the playlist as much as I could. The last 3 songs being Critical Track number 5 and then both Cutting Room 4 tracks aren't.
Weird.
Yeah, which is absolutely bizarre, because the only Shenmue soundtrack on Spotify is a compilation Shenmue and Shenmue 2 best of album or something. But most of those tracks were on Spotify, so those have been added as well.
Well, that's an important clarification. At least something got added there. When you're done listening, you can find the show on social media at Soundchat OST. You can leave some feedback for us there. How are we doing with these episodes? What games should we cover in the future? You should let us know. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
Next week, I'm going to be talking about Joe McDermott.
I will be talking about Carpenter Brute. All right, Joe, let's play us out.
So obviously I did not find any fan remixes or covers of the music in this game because, again, I'm one of 4 people that have played it. Which you'd think I'd learn eventually to stop putting myself in that situation, but I will never learn because I refuse. So we're just going to play another song from the soundtrack. This one is another sort of rendition of Congratulations, being Yamada's Departure. It's the song that plays when you are setting up and getting ready to head out into a dungeon in order to do a run. And, you know, being called Yamada's Departure, what better song to end on? So I hope you enjoy that.
Sounds pretty fitting. Thanks for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.